Greg Palast is with us. He's an investigative reporter for the BBC. He's the author of Vulture's Picnic, which we talked to him about a couple of months ago, I guess it was. And Greg has an incredible story about Mitt Romney and where he's getting some funding. Tell us about it, Greg.
Well, while everyone's talking about Mitt Romney, was he a vulture? There's no question that the guys funding him are vultures. In fact, they've always called themselves vulture financiers. It's not just a pejorative term. It's something that they wear proudly, though they're lately trying to change their feathers a bit, at least through PR. The number one donor for the Republican Party and the big backer for Mitt Romney is a multi-billionaire named Paul Singer. Now, everyone is familiar with the Kochs, but he's organized a group of billionaires, of which the Kochs are part, that originally put their hopes into the Chris Christie campaign. That's where that came from. These billionaires were behind it. They moved over to Mitt Romney as the only kind of banker's bet that they have. Now, Paul Singer, who is now Mitt Romney's chief funder, this billionaire, how does he make his money? How does a vulture make their money? You know, people have been throwing around the word, but let me give you a couple of examples because I've been investigating him. I had in fact, obviously he's one of my key targets in a book that I just put out, Vulture's Picnic. In the case of Singer, for example, he made his first billion off of the asbestos industry. By the way, they're called vultures because they wait for things to die. They want things to die. Industries, countries, that's how they make their money. In the case of asbestos, Owens Corning Company and a couple of others had hid from their workers the fact that their product was going to kill them. It gives you asbestosis, and most of their workers have some form of it. You end up, your lungs turn to mush and you drown within yourself. It's really a horrible way to go. When this was uncovered, the asbestos manufacturers, including especially Owens Corning, went into bankruptcy, and they agreed to pay all of their future profits to their workers to cover their medical costs and the deaths that were coming. Paul Singer bought Owens Corning out of bankruptcy for peanuts. I can't remember the number, but it was negligible sum because they were bankrupt, and no one thought that they would ever recover it because they owed all this money to their workers. Singer then went on a massive lobbying campaign in New York and in Washington and got the attention of a powerful politician in Washington named George W. Bush. Bush, under the guise of tort reform, was able to help Singer knock down the payments to the dying workers. And it's estimated, everyone can have their estimate of what the workers would have gotten, but they ended up taking about 20%, about 20 cents on the dollar of what they were owed for their illnesses and as compensation for pain and suffering and obviously death. I mean,
So if I understand correctly, basically Paul Singer bought Owens Corning and the liabilities that they had to those workers, and then he found a way to negotiate down what he was going to pay to them, essentially buying the company really cheaply because of the problems they were having, and then saving even more money by taking it away from the victims to whom that money had been promised.
Yeah, and then he flips it. He's not in the asbestos business. He flipped the company. Elliott Management, which is his company, he flipped it for $1 billion profit. So in other words, he takes a company, puts in a couple pennies, takes over the company, basically shafts the workers out of their payments for pain and suffering and death, and then now that the liability's off the company's back for their workers, he flips it and makes $1 billion. That was his first billion. That was his first killing, and you could say, and killing isn't overly metaphoric here.
Has Mitt Romney commented on this at all? Has he even been asked about it?
Mitt Romney has been able somehow to dodge the bullet on his association with Singer, even though it's his number one donor, which is quite extraordinary. I should say that when Paul Singer backed Rudy Giuliani, it was all over my research which was done for BBC television on Singer, and I've tried to contact him. And he's contacted my bosses, by the way, and tried to threaten me to stop me from reporting. BBC's not backing off.
Is that right?
But
so what is he personally or someone representing him says what? Greg Palast needs to back off?
He's the billionaire. I was surprised I even got his attention. I felt like I'd won the Pulitzer Prize, actually, because usually we don't get the billionaires to bother with you. He called my bosses at BBC Television London, his PR person, Singer, and said,
we have a file on Greg Palast. And BBC said, we know, we read his book, but, we've got the file on you, buddy. And, we've been trying to get him to get on camera to talk about what he's done. But I have to say that the New York papers very much picked up the story of the vulture money behind Rudy Giuliani, because 4 years ago, Singer had put his money behind Giuliani. And that got a lot of coverage, that Giuliani's getting his money from this really creepy so-called job creator. That he was a vulture, and they use it. Even the New York Post, Murdoch's paper, used the term vulture to describe this guy. That's one of the problems. A lot of the papers that were happy to call Singer a vulture when he was supporting Giuliani, whom they didn't like, now that he is funding the standard bearer for the GOP, these same sources, the Murdoch papers, seem to be quite silent.
Well, we're going to keep an eye on it. And you know what? If it becomes a bigger story, if and when Romney is the nominee, that's okay too. Maybe we don't need to jump the gun on this one, since it could translate into it could have a bigger effect if it comes out a little bit later in the general election, so to speak. Greg Palast, investigative reporter. Vulture's Picnic is the latest book. Great work, Greg. Keep it up.
Thank you very much, David. And